Okay, can you hear me? Welcome, everyone. This is Nicole Leader. I am the occupational therapist with Sturgeon School's pre-K and kindergarten team, and today I'm here to talk to you about sleep and bedtime. So we just had our daylight savings. I'm sure you guys are all having fun, right? Lots of screaming kids and grumpy evenings, nobody wanting to get up in the morning. So I thought that today would be a really good opportunity to talk about sleep, because I know that this is such a challenging time for everyone. So take a minute to kind of think about what challenges you guys have when it comes to sleep. What kind of questions do you have, and what hurdles do you always have to try to problem solve on a more regular basis? Some of those things that come up most often are, how do I get my kid out of bed? How do I get them to stay in bed? They're in bed, but I can't get them to fall asleep, and they keep waking up at night. How do I get them to stay asleep? So these are some of the most common problems that we see as parents and that we support those families with. So I'm hoping that some of the strategies we talk about today will help to give you some answers for all of these questions. So we know that sleep is important. There's been a ton of research that's gone into learning about what sleep looks like and why it's so important to us. We know that it's when we grow, when we create those neurotransmitters. That's also when our brain cleans up any of those unused neurons or waste, so that when we wake up, we can stay alert and focused and engaged and learn. And we also know that while we're sleeping, that's when all that antioxidant activity is activated. So as a baby and an infant, that's why so much of their time is consumed by sleep. Their sleep and wake cycles are primarily guided by those physiological needs for food, going to the bathroom, being comforted by mom and dad, and then they go back to sleep. So their body can put to use all those good nutritional calories that they just drank. So sleep is pretty much everything that they do up to a certain point. At some point, we start to develop a more, actually right from birth, we start to develop circadian rhythms. But that is, and actually probably even in utero as well, but that is not something that we necessarily see until they're a little bit older. So by the time our little babies are about 3 to 6 months, is when we can start to see a little bit more of a regular sleep cycle starting to come about. Yet sleep is still going to be one of their primary activities. We know that by the time a kid's 2, they have spent more time in bed than they will have awake. And if you consider that if we each lived to be about 100, we would all spend about 33 years in our bed. So, keep that in the back of your mind. If you're willing to spend $100,000 on a car, make sure you're investing in a good mattress where you're going to spend most of your, at least 1/3 of your life. But yeah, when we see how much children use in terms of energy during the day, really the amount of sleep that they need is a good balance for that. And the amount of sleep that they need is a reflection of the growth. And the child is going from being something that can't even really hold its head all the way up to something that's walking and talking and learning how to use the toilet by the time they're 2. So that's a tremendous amount of sleep or growth that's happening. So those circadian rhythms are what's influenced by natural light and darkness, and it helps to drive our sleep-wake cycles and so that we can manage our energy levels during the day. And we actually have a very adaptive gene, and it's called a circadian gene, and it's specifically designed to help us regulate. It's constantly recalibrating and readjusting for things like jet lag or late nights and growth. And these genes are actually also responsible for things like controlling mood, motivational behaviors, how hungry you are and how much you want to eat. They also help you regulate your emotions and your stress responses, as well as that inflammation in your body. So you can see that all of those body's functions are connected. And that if we have a disruption in one of those areas, like, a lack of sleep, you can expect that you're going to have problems with things like mood, motivation, hunger, stress management, and especially executive functioning. That's one of the most significant impacts that we would see from that lack of sleep. So we have this capacity for learning, curiosity, motivation, and creativity, and that all arises from that neurochemical balance that happens when we hit that deep sleep. So yeah, sleep is really important for that mental and physical development that's happening. And I mean, just consider all those little guys that are struggling, for instance, with ADHD. That one of the chicken or egg conversations there is ADHD a symptom of lack of sleep, causing impulsivity, dysregulation, lack of those executive functions, or is ADHD causing that lack of sleep? It's kind of a what is what? Where does the beginning end and the end? So I just want to also start earlier on giving you an understanding of what sleep looks like. So there are two main types of sleep, and then even those can be subdivided into different levels of sleep. But for the most part, we have non-REM sleep, which is called quiet sleep. And that's when your brain waves are really slow moving in that kind of delta formation. And it consumes up to 80% of our sleep. It's that really deep sleep. And you're almost in like a frozen paralysis. And it's at this time that we get lots of that tissue regrowth and repair, the release of hormones to facilitate learning. We get all of the food that we eat and generates neurochemistry in our gut. And then at night, our brain uses that to create hormones like serotonin, which is actually that building block for melatonin. This non-REM sleep is necessary for what we would call declarative memory. So it's that memory that of specific events, specific facts, and that recall memory. So all that information that you gather throughout your day is sorted and stored and organized, and then that's how it's made into learning and hardwired and consolidated. One of those reasons why cramming for an exam doesn't work, because you don't have the opportunity for sleep. So you're not able to move that short-term memory into long-term memory. That second type of sleep is called REM sleep. It's active or rapid eye movement sleep. It's the active phase. So we see lots of heart rate changes. Oftentimes breathing will become irregular, and you get a lot more variation in that brain wave. So this is when we might experience dreaming. There's actually a perception, although it's still kind of being researched, but there is still this perception that during that REM sleep is when we will, that's kind of where our emotional regulation happens from. We get that opportunity to practice in the unconscious, dealing with things like emotions that we don't get to encounter, or that we may not have been able to organize in our day-to-day lives. So we really need both of these types of sleep, even as adults, so that we can rest and repair and regenerate all of our energy that's needed for the next day. And so good sleep helps us to organize our emotion, and as well as organize our linear logic thinking so that we can consolidate and integrate all of those life experiences. Problems with sleep in both phases or either phase will affect that hardwiring in our brain and make it a little bit less capable of making those memories and growing and staying regulated. And so you won't have all those conditions that are necessary to put those experiences together in a meaningful way. So both types of sleep take about 90 minutes to run through. So, about a 90-minute nap is what anybody would need to kind of get a really restful, rejuvenating siesta, whether you're an adult or a kid. So what are some common problems that we experience, not only as children, but even for adults? These are typically broken down once again into two different types. Lots of people can experience problems that are related to medical difficulties. So that could be, for instance, gut pain as a response to reflux disease. And that's really common in both children and adults, even newborns. If you're waking up coughing or having that pain in your esophagus or reflux. Constipation is another huge one, especially for our kids. We often will hear, my kiddo doesn't poop all day, and then as soon as he falls asleep, he has a bowel movement. And typically that is because they're holding all day, and then when their body finally relaxes, they no longer have that control over their bowels. So constipation can be really difficult and cause lots of gut pains, and can make nighttime really challenging. Any gastrointestinal issues, whether it's diabetes, celiac disease, irritable bowel syndrome, any of that. We have, so serotonin is one of those more significant hormones when it comes to transitioning into sleep. And 80%, it's produced in our gut. So 80% of those chemicals that we use in our brain are actually developed in the gut. So that population of bacteria in our gut, if that's not healthy and you have gastro problems, or there's inflammation issues like reflux, IBS, celiac, constipation, then, subsequently it would make sense that you would have difficulties with sleep as well. So yeah, the health of the gut kind of affects the brain, and then the health of the brain affects the gut. So it's vice versa. They really interplay off of one another. But we also have medical conditions like anxiety or depression. Those can really prevent you from having that transition in your brain waves and really impact your quality of sleep. And then you have this whole population of individuals with neurodiversity that have, that sleep disorders are kind of built right into neurodivergence. They don't have that same chemical balance, and even their genetics have been can present a little bit differently. So they don't have that natural production of melatonin in the same way that you or I would. So that kind of impacts their ability to wind their brain down. The second type of issue that often affects children, it would be categorized into like a sleep disorders category. And these usually occur in the REM phases. So as our brain waves kind of shift into sleep and then back awake again into this breakthrough of wakefulness, we might see things like sleepwalking or night terrors or nightmares. Oftentimes those are associated with things like anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder. And the difference between adults and kids is that kids oftentimes have a hard time making sense of what's real and what's not real. When we have kids that experience things like night terrors or sleepwalking, it's important to remember that they're not actually awake. So there isn't a need to wake them up and explain what's going on and that they're okay. You can just gently guide them back into their beds, say, I'm here, you're okay, tuck them in, and then kind of, make them just be assured that they're in bed and safe. They never actually kind of move out of that REM sleep. Whereas nightmares, oftentimes they will wake up and you may need to be there to help console them, let them know that, what's real and what's not real. So when you have issues with sleep, the first place we recommend you start is always checking in with your pediatrician. They might even recommend doing something like a sleep study. Lots of times it doesn't mean anything will come of it, but that pediatrician is the keeper of the story. Outside of you, we would hope that they know as much about your kiddo as any other group that might be working with you and your family, and they can help to make connections between therapists and make referrals. And sometimes it's even just that accumulation of concerns that over time that kind of help to make that big picture that might come together when your child is, 8, 9, or even an adult. So it's really important to keep them in a loop so that they know what's going on and they know that sleep is a concern for you. But, keep in mind, they're just another tool in your toolbox. So we've talked about those two main difficulties with sleep, the medical related difficulties, and then those disordered types of sleep. But for young children, I would say most of our sleep problems are related to poor sleep habits, and neither of those underlying causes. So this is why one of our top tips for today is to develop a consistent routine or good sleep hygiene to promote readiness to sleep. So developing a consistent routine is what oftentimes doctors or specialists might call sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is not necessarily just your bedtime routine, but it's actually all of those routines in your day that will help to make or that help to support you as you transition through sleep time. So those habits can include routines, exercise, the food you eat, the opportunities you have for self-care. So all of that is what actually contributes to sleep hygiene, not just what happens right before bed. After hearing me talk a few times, I'm sure you guys will roll your eyes as I say this, but oftentimes these categories or these tips can be broken down into sensory strategies, emotional strategies, and physical strategies to help promote our kids' readiness for sleep. So we're going to talk about the top 10 tips for building a healthy routine that will support your child as they transition into sleep. So tip number 1, wake your child up the same time each morning. This is doctor recommended, well-researched, therapist recommended. In order to get your kiddos to sleep at night, it's important to wake them up at the same time every morning. It's so tempting, especially if you've had those late nights or rough nights, to let them sleep in a little bit. And, there's always the exception to the rule, but that actually messes with our circadian rhythms. And those genes, which are constantly recalibrating all the time, are having to work extra hard. And so it can actually feed into a later sleep pattern that keeps them awake at night. So, as an adult, you kind of get into those habits where you go to bed at a typical time and you wake up the same time every day. And then you'll find that on the weekends, despite wanting to sleep in, you're kind of like rolling in bed, shifting around, going, gosh, why can't I sleep anymore? And I'm not sure if you've ever slept in on a weekend And then when you woke up, you ended up feeling like, gosh, why am I feeling more groggy than I usually do? Like, I got more than enough hours of sleep, but I still, feel really drowsy and groggy, and I should be really well rested. But that's actually something that's called sleep inertia. And when you take yourself out of your natural sleep regime, it contributes to this grogginess. It can impair your alertness and memory and reaction time, and can actually create that impression that you got less sleep than you did. So some tools that might be useful for your little guy or your girl, your child, especially here in Canada when we have such late, the darkness comes so early in winter, and that sun stays up so long in the summer. Sometimes it can be hard for our natural circadian rhythms to kind of make sense of what's happening. So these grow clocks can sometimes give your child some natural cues, like, oh, the sun is rising. It kind of start that morning adrenaline and moves them into a nice gentle wake. And it helps to kind of remind them, oh, the sun's not up yet. I can stay in bed. I know that me personally, my kids actually had a hard time sleeping with it, even that dim blue light. And so we just used you can even consider using timers, little night lights on a timer. So those night lights come on in the morning, rather than, it actually might even just be cheaper than some of those grow clocks. Tip number 2. I bet you'll never get this. It's put them to bed at the same time every night. Obviously, once again, there's those exceptions. There's the waking up or, having a Christmas party and then going to bed really late and, having to deal with that. But this, once again, it has a term. This is what we would call social jet lag. It's not jet lag, but it's called social jet lag. And we see this huge in teenagers. As your kids get a little bit older, it's got a huge impact. So when we go to bed later, but we wake up at the same time, or we go to bed later and we sleep in a little bit more, once again, we don't stay in those natural circadian rhythms. And that can take a change on our hormonal system as it's trying to recalibrate. And sometimes individuals are a little bit more resilient, and it doesn't really affect them all that much. But then, especially our kids that already have difficulties with sleep, I find that this is really hard on them. So that one special occasion, sometimes you go, was that even worth it? I don't know. And so going to bed at the same time, it helps your body to predict what's coming. And I think as a parent, you don't want to eliminate all the fun things on the weekends, but it does, I think, help give you perspective. So if your child is bouncing off the walls the next day, or they're grumpy and snapping at you, you can kind of step back and go, okay, this isn't them being demonstrating these behaviors because they want to. It's because they can't manage their emotions. They can't regulate. And so when they're yelling at you, it might be a battle that you just choose not to fight that day. So this social jet lag, I think, has a bigger impact on parents for those little guys, and having to reset our expectations of what we have for our children at that time. So when is the right time to go to sleep for your kid? We want to make sure that we are catching our kids when they're in level 1 or level 2 of some of these sleepy cycles, so that we can put those kids to bed happy. And a matter of 15 minutes can make or break your sleep routine. So we have some of these researched symptoms or signs that you might see in your kids, and sometimes they're so subtle. Sometimes you could miss them so easily. But take some time and kind of track and watch for yourself. What are your own sleepy cues? What are the sleepy cues your kids are giving you? And can we, like, what time are they happening at? Do they change from day to day? It's yeah, these are true for younger kids as well as older kids. So if we're able to catch our kids before they reach that level 3, where they're turning wild and silly, crying and screaming, have difficulties falling to sleep, then we can prevent them from crashing to sleep. And that's what we see when we get that second wind, and that our brains are actually getting a cortisol dump, which is a stress hormone, or adrenaline. So the two options are: we wait until that adrenaline runs its course so our kid can fall asleep, or we let them go to sleep with all those stress hormones in their brain. And they might be so tired that they just crash to sleep. But what that might result in is difficulties with those brain waves naturally transitioning into a more smooth pattern. And you can have an impact on the quality of sleep. So, they might, so going to sleep with that adrenaline and that cortisol lingering in that system means that you might wake up at the night, you might not be able to stay asleep, or you're not reaching that really deep REM sleep that we know is so critical for managing all those faulty gears in our nervous system. So yeah, making sure that we avoid that level 3 whenever possible is really important. Tip number 4, physical activity and fresh air each day helps the child to sleep better at night. So in order to get physical fatigue, we need to expel all that natural energy and physical energy that our bodies are stored up all day. I don't know if you've ever gone a long car ride and your kid is strapped in the car for 10 hours, playing games, watching the iPad, not getting a lot of opportunity for movement. But those nights are really difficult. It's really challenging to get your child to sleep. So you might even actually see almost the same symptoms for children as they start into grade school, and they go from kindergarten, where there's lots of movement and playtime, into this learning situation where there's a lot of sitting and listening, and not as many natural opportunities for movement. So I find as kids get older, those natural opportunities to expel that energy oftentimes just kind of are depleted. And we don't necessarily realize the consequences of that. So consistent exercise contributes to that serotonin dopamine relationship that lends itself to sleep. I will say that it's important to avoid some of that, especially aerobic exercise right before bed, where it really amps us up. And sometimes you get a dump of adrenaline, so you can win the hockey game and push yourself really hard. So that's not the type of exercise we're talking about, but even just giving them an opportunity to go outside. Let your kiddo take the key and go to the mailbox. Walk the dog around the block, or maybe take the garbage outside. More and more research is going into what nature and being outside does to our central nervous system and that response to nature. And that, it does wonders for regulating our brain waves and just helping with those natural transitions in our day. So get outside, get a little bit of exercise. Tip number 5, spend time together. So kids really crave their parents' attention, and especially if they're in school every day or you work every day, sometimes it can be really hard to give them that attention. So we want to give an opportunity for them to tell you their story and for them to hear your story. Spend some time with them each day, even if it's just 5 minutes. And a lot of times kids then won't have to maximize on your time at bedtime because you've had those eye-to-eye meeting opportunities earlier on. And that little bit of one-on-one time and that little bit of physical contact, whether it's a hug, a handhold, a little bit of a snuggle, can help release those oxytocin and serotonin hormones that help settle our brains and our nervous system. And it really just, the goal in this is to make them feel safe and secure. It also is a really good strategy, just kind of to model that intentional time to connect, to say it's okay to put supper on the back burner for 5 minutes so that I can prioritize you. It's okay to wait to unload the groceries from the car so that I can kind of say, hey, what happened today? Did anything special happen? Or do you need a hug? And to let them know that they're really important to you. I always go back to one of Jody, well, I don't know if it was Jody Carrington's, but a phrase that I heard from Jody Carrington is that you need to connect before you direct. And relationship building and relationship repair is what fills our kids' buckets. So those emotional check-ins really help your kids understand that you're connecting with them so that you can take their perspective when you're trying to give them that direction. Tip number 6, provide sensory tools to help your child into bed. So there are so many different tools you can use. Making sure that they get that opportunity for physical movement just shortly after supper time, not too close to bedtime, so that they can settle in for bed, as we mentioned. If you have a child that just can't stop moving, sometimes shifting that movement into something that's a little bit more predictable, adding some rhythm and some organization like counting and singing can be enough to kind of take their energy and use it in a natural way. So if your kid is bouncing all over the couch and or on the bed and you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't get them to lay down, then see if you can add some rhythm and some predictability. Maybe it's, 2 little monkeys are jumping on the bed. One fell off and bumped his head. Mama called the doctor and the doctor said, put that monkey right to bed. So, and then you can kind of cuddle them into bed. So you're taking those natural bouts of energy and using it in an intentional way. And that brings them some organization. Using, even adding things like, heavy work, like stomping down the hallway to give them, to brush their teeth, or using bear walks as they walk, up the stairs can give them a more intention behind their movement. While they're getting some heavy work and some proprioceptive input. So to speak a little bit more about the sensory senses, each one of us does have sensory systems that are so unique, and there is not really a one-size-fits-all answer. So you need to keep that in mind, and sometimes it's a little bit of a trial and error to see what works and what doesn't work for your family and for your child. We talked a little bit about movement, but we also have, our mouth, our hearing, touch, vision, smell, and our proprioceptive, our sense of deep touch, all of that to take into consideration while we're considering our sensory systems. So, something that we can consider when we're trying to calm our child is their eyes, maybe turning down those lights after dinner time or closing the blinds if it's in the middle of summer, turning off those screens. So we're reducing some visual stimulation. And then this can just help to encourage that natural melatonin release and that transition into sleep. You can also use hearing to shift them into a more, a more settled tone. Consider like putting on some calm music in the background, even just the way that you change your tone of voice, talking a little bit quieter and a little bit slower, so that they really have to tune into what you're saying as you talk to them. We have lots of mouth tools that you can use. A really mindful snack is really important right before bed. Well, maybe I would say, let's say 30 to 45 minutes before bed, so that we can try to minimize any reflux complications. But, consider if your child responds differently to like a warm snack or a cold snack. Drinking through a small straw to give that mouth some really heavy oral input. Lots of foods with tryptophan. I mean, consider yourself how you feel after you eat your turkey and potato dinner on Thanksgiving. So that tryptophan actually attaches to those carbohydrates and is used to pass our blood-brain barrier and can kind of like give our sleepy system a big hit. So, giving a snack with bananas, any kind of dairy or red meat protein, almonds, lots of those beans like lima beans or kidney beans can be really good for providing natural sources of tryptophan. So giving one of those paired with a carbohydrate of some kind can help to settle them into sleep. Scent is something else. This is a really tricky one because scent is so tightly connected with emotion, and so many scents are. There are so many people that are sensitive to scents, but more and more research is going into the use of aromatherapies and smells, for instance. So there are some scents that have been researched to impact quality of sleep. And so if you have a diffuser in the home, feel free to kind of turn that on at night. And some of the scents that are often associated with getting ready for bed would be lavender, chamomile, jasmine, sandalwood, but also even just the sense of mom and dad. So, giving your child their sweater to sleep with, and helping to, that also would probably help to kind of pair them with that sense of security, that calming that comes with those strongly associated positive connections between safety and security. And then touch. We talked a little bit about touch when it comes to creating that those co-regulating moments with your child, giving them a hug and a touch and a cuddle. But deep massage and deep pressure touch can help decrease that cortisol at any time. It doesn't even have to be at bedtime. So if you had a massage during the day, it actually helps your body to expel some of those cortisol stress hormones in your day and increase the serotonin to build those melatonin building blocks. So, it brings you kind of into a greater capacity for self-regulation and can help you get ready for sleep. So also, your child might prefer to hold on to something, a tag from a favorite blanket, their favorite stuffed animal. Even consider, the warmth, like putting your child's pajamas in the dryer right before bed. And so when they put them on, they're all nice and snuggled. They actually have found that having a warm bath before bed and then transitioning into a cooler room can help to maintain a good body temperature throughout your sleep, because your body expels some of that extra heat when it's in a hot bath. So it goes to bed a little bit cooler. So there's tons of considerations when it comes to our sensory system, and it's important to reflect on your own family and your own child to kind of see what tools you think might be useful for them. As we're talking about sensory tools, I just want to really quickly talk about screen time. I know that I do believe we have also some resources on the Parent Hub that are specific to screen time, so I won't go into detail too much, but limit screen time just because of the way it impacts your brain, especially before bedtime. There is, more and more research indicating how much screen time interrupts your internal clocks. And that combination of that blue light, which impairs melatonin production, as well as just the moving lights and that visual input, as well as the gameplay that stimulates that brain and pulls you into that, just one more level, just one more game, constantly kind of giving you almost that addictive feeling. Once again, it increases those stress hormones in the brain. So even if you think your child is going to sleep really well, it might be impacting their ability to get that really deep non-REM sleep that we need for a restful sleep and an adjusted disposition that next day. So tech before bed, it blocks the sleep hormones. It delays the circadian rhythms. And they say for about every hour of blue light during the day, that suppresses or decreases the production of melatonin by up to 30 minutes. So if you consider how much time, even as an adult, you're in front of a screen, especially if you sit in front of a screen for work all day, that can really accumulate on a daily basis. So it keeps our brain on a different wave cycle than we want them to be on to help those kids settle into sleep. And it also impacts the transition between REM and non-REM sleep. And with that lack of neurochemical production and the cleaning at night, they're waking up and it's impacting their ability to regulate, to learn, and to function. It might even mean at first turning the screen on and having no volume, or turning a screen on and leaving it on across the room rather than having an iPad or a device in front of them, and then slowly weaning that away as much as possible. And then keep in mind that you want to practice what you preach. So if you're telling your child that they shouldn't be on their device all night, you also have to model that, because they're going to go, well, Mom, Dad, you're on your phone. So we want to practice what we're preaching. I guess the going recommendation is that at least 1 hour before bed, there should be no screen times, as much as possible. Tip number 7, consistent bedtime tools. So this is accessing those cognitive tools. Having your kid know what to expect is important, because the unexpected is alerting and dysregulating. And kids love that structure and predictability and consistency. It helps reduce our stress cortisol levels in the brain, and that consistent routine where everything kind of falls into place the same way, and kind of takes away that element of surprise. And so that you as a child can trust that everything is going to kind of match your expectations to the best of, well, not always, but to the best of our abilities. Our nervous system can then calm down. We don't have to always be on high alert to go, what's next? What's happening? Is Dad going to be here today? Is Mom going to remember to give me a snack? My tummy is kind of groggy. Do I go to the bathroom or do I not? Will Mom get mad at me? So that level of high alert, you can kind of set that aside, because that predictability, it brings that organization that our nervous system craves. And a consistent routine is really, it's all the things that we would normally do. So we just put them in the same order and we use the same language every day. I think one of the key take-home messages of this, though, is that consistent bedtime routines, they do need to be done in an attuned space. So we need to be mindful of those emotional and sensory challenges that our kid might be experiencing, and giving more or less support as needed. So for instance, when they're experiencing that social jet lag, the independence we might expect them to have during that bedtime routine might be a little bit less. So we do have to kind of, as an attuned parent, go, what's the mood of the home today? What's the mood of my child? How can I adjust to make this successful? But yeah, so an example, I do have just an example on the slide. You might give them a snack, toothbrush, bath, toilet time, a story, a mindful moment and a deep breath and kiss, and then lights out. I just want to really quickly touch on those mindful moments and what that could look like. What you do with your mind can help build resilience, and mindfulness has a tremendous impact on sleep. Our minds are actually wired sometimes for the negative because, before all this evolution happened, we needed to be ready for that flight or fight or freeze response. And so it's at night that we might see some of those worries arise in our kids. They might have those big questions. What if? What's going to happen? How about this? Why? And it's important to acknowledge those, but then not dwell on them and redirect that attention to something that's more positive. So what we do with our thoughts, it takes years to master, and I don't even know if it's possible to do so. I'm the worst person when it comes to mindfulness. So in order to change that internal stress response and to maximize our resilience, take a minute to spend with your child to shift your consciousness in towards a gratitude practice that you experience, and talk about those wonderful things. What's one thing that made you happy today? What's one thing that you look forward to tomorrow? I was so proud when you do this. Think about one thing that you can really talk about and share, and that thought actually gets tagged with norepinephrine and dopamine, and it becomes a keeper. That's what helps to create that long-term memory of happiness. So it seems like a little thing, but if you're able to kind of spend a minute doing some of those, maybe those sleep meditations, practicing that deep breathing, reassuring from that emotional perspective, talking about those positive things, this is a practice that will take them so far in their life. These are just examples of how you might use some visuals to support bedtime routine. So we have an example on the right where somebody just drew some pictures. You could use a dry erase, a piece of paper, and a felt pen. It doesn't have to be anything special. We have one that's kind of made on the computer, and then there's one with just some pictures that are cut out that you can rearrange from day to day. If, things might change when they're with mom one day and dad with one day. So there is no right or wrong when it comes to visuals, but visuals help to give that reassurance to kids that, the same thing is happening. It's that sense of independence. I don't know what's next, but I know how to find out. So explore with visuals and see how your child responds. Tip number 8 is set the stage for sleep. This is actually, once again, really connected to that sensory system that we talked about on those earlier slides. But these are really well research-based. So an example might be considering the noise in your home. So some people prefer white noise or brown noise or any other type of noise machine, the sound of nature in the background. And how this helps is it kind of helps to remove your sensory system from attuning to those jolts of sound in the background. So sometimes if you've got, cats running up and down the hallway, or a baby crying in the next room, or mom and dad in the basement or downstairs doing dishes, you get those loud bangs and crashes, and that constant white noise that plays in the background can help to make that environment a little bit more organizing. If you don't have an environment where they have all those sounds, then white noise might be more irritating than anything. So once again, you have to consider your own child and your own environment, but that constant white noise might be a tool to consider. Temperature is really important. Heat in the room will decrease your capacity for sleep. And we often, I think, and I did it myself as a parent, we worry about whether or not our little one is going to be too cold at night. But I don't know how often. It's not as natural to think about whether or not they're going to be too hot. So do they have really hot, fuzzy PJs, a really fuzzy blanket? Are they going to, break into sweats? Because that will likely break them out of that natural sleep transition, because their body's going to be uncomfortable. So they say about 16 to 20 degrees Celsius is recommended. I feel like 16 might be a little bit low for some of our children, but for women and men as they get older, that might be a temperature that they need. So that's kind of the recommended drop in temperature for nighttime, making sure those rooms are really nice and cool and well ventilated and well hydrated. Even sometimes if they're dry, having to add a little bit of a humidifier can help to make that temperature in the room feel just right. And then we did talk a little bit about darkness as well. But that darkness supports those circadian rhythms, the changes in hormones, and it helps to downshift those brain waves to transition us into sleep. If your child has some fear that you're trying to address and they need a little bit of a nightlight, even considering what type of night light you're giving them. So sometimes those lights that have a really bright white hue or a blue hue can actually be alerting, versus lights that have more of a red or orange hue to them. I also have found personally for my own kids that those cloud bee animals that are here in the picture were really useful because they were on a timer. So my kiddos could turn them on independently if they woke up in the night. And then after they fell asleep, the lights actually turned out. So if they were kind of moving out of that non-REM sleep, they didn't see that light and kind of jolt them awake, and it helped to kind of keep them into that natural transition between REM and non-REM sleep, but still gave them that independence to feel that they had the competency when they woke up to go, oh, it's okay, I know where my light is. I can turn it on. I don't have to go get mom and dad. I can do this. So I found those tools really helpful personally. Tip number 9 is we want to help to teach our kids to learn to self-soothe. So this is a lifelong journey. It starts right from 4 to 6 months when we are learning about those circadian rhythms and we're starting to see those natural sleep and wake cycles be a little bit more defined. But it takes a long time to do independently. So this might be something that you feel like you're doing with your child rather than letting your child do alone for quite some time. But I mean, being proactive is, I think, a big one. Make some of these tools part of your routine so that they don't need to ask for them later. And that can be a way to kind of help manage that anxiety. So that can be things like making sure they have just a right amount of water in their water bottle beside their bed every night, so they're not waking up saying, I'm thirsty. Making sure you schedule maybe not only 1, but 2 bathroom breaks, because we all know that you can go to the bathroom once and doesn't mean they don't have to go again in 10 minutes just so that they can get out of bed. So anticipate that, and you can even build it right into your routine. And then, keeping in mind that we want to build consistency, but not rigidity. So it's almost like building in a predictable unpredictability. We don't want to teach our kids that you can only sleep with Bunny, because then when Bunny loses an ear or we leave it at grandma, that can actually create anxiety. So it might be saying, oh, I wonder what stuffy mom's going to sleep with tonight, and which one are you picking? Or, oh, you've got Bunny and the dinosaur today. Oh, look, they're both so cuddly, and really helping to define this, that these tools they don't have to necessarily look like just one thing. Our goal really is that we want to show our kids that we believe in them. So we want to stay calm and connected, even when you have hit your 10th button and you want to scream and say, just go to bed. Just kind of reminding them, it's okay. You got this. mommy's going to be there in just a few minutes. So get into bed and I'll be there. Giving, slowly stretching their ability to do some of these things independently. Yeah, and to bridge their independence with some of these tools. And so it's not just only you that can give them that independence. And then, reminding them in the morning, wow, I was so proud of how you slept with Bunny and Dino all by yourself. Or you slept for 10 minutes before mommy came. Wow, that was amazing. So reinforcing the positive things that we see, and so that we can build on those building blocks. Okay, tip number 10, last one. Consistency. We want to make sure that we are calm, firm but gentle, consistent but boring. So we want to make sure that we're, when our kids are asking us that 10th question, or when they wake up in the night and they come into our room, we're not subconsciously reinforcing that behavior. We're keeping our response really neutral, and reassuring them, and then guiding them back to bed. We want to, just, first thing, make sure that we're not yelling, and then do our best to kind of practice our own pause. Take a minute, take a breath, keep your energies low, and just fake it till you make it. You got this. Stay calm. Don't let them see your frustration. There is not a one-size-fits-all answer. There are some families that, recommend putting a mat beside your bed so your child, can come and sleep beside your bed if they want to. And there are some families that insist on having their kids in their own room, in their own bed all the time. And so there is no well-researched strategy that says that one answer is more important or more beneficial than another. But what is important is making sure that you have that attuned sense of what your child is needing, and not necessarily just following a protocol. There are days where your child may just not be able to regroup. And then, putting them in the room and closing the door may not be the answer on that day. So being really attuned and monitoring those emotions is really important. But coming up with a consistent and accepted response with you and your partner is going to be important, so that they know that when they're with mom and when they're with dad, there's not going to be differences in expectations. Lots of different things work for lots of different families. So there's no right, no wrong answer. Whatever your expectations are, it's important that your kid knows that those are the expectations. I did submit an example of myself reading what's called a social story about bed that can be used as an example of what you might do to kind of teach what your expectations of your child. I expect my child to stay in the bed and sleep by themselves. Or I expect when they wake up, they can come and lay beside me, but don't wake me up. Or, whatever the accepted responses are, make sure that your child is also a part of that, so that they're not caught off guard. That take-home message, consistency is key for all. It takes time to establish some of those routines, so don't give up. Keep those consistent expectations. It could be weeks or even months before you see some of the benefits of keeping those routines consistent. And just remember to be gracious with your child as well as yourself. Sometimes, for example, if you're starting to transition your child into their own bed after they've slept with you for 4 years, it could take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. So just to reassure your kid that they're okay, and then also be gracious with yourself. Say it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have days that are really tired, and just give yourself a pat on the back. You can only regulate another person if you're regulated yourself. So remember to practice that pause. If you have trouble making any of those steps, or if you have issues or specific concerns, then that is when you can reach out to us and we can help brainstorm a little bit more specifically for your specific situation, because everybody is a little bit different and a little bit unique. So yeah, children are really complex and sleep sounds easy. It's one of our body's essential needs, but for some reason it's just not so simple. And sometimes when you're juggling all the puzzle pieces, it can be hard to see what the picture is. So feel free to reach out to your doctor and to reach out to myself or even the social worker here at the school if you are having any issues. Thank you so much for spending time with me today as we discuss this very essential bodily function, and I hope that you were able to learn something. Talk to you soon.